Hello and welcome to another ELAN original presentation. This week we are covering Event Mapping 104, Advanced Event Mapping. So let's do a recap. Event maps are our if-then statements. An if/or statement would be our event that starts our event maps or macros. An and statement would be our conditions. Our then statements would be our commands we want to actually happen. Anything listed under the events section can trigger the event to start. All things listed under the conditions section must be true to reach the command statements. In week 2, we covered what were timers. We have 3 different types of timers. Run once system timers. These are countdown timers. We have repeating system timers. These are countdown timers that restart once they hit 0 and run in the background. And then we have timed events. Timed events are triggered by a specified time or an offset of sunrise or sunset. Then we have Booleans and variables we covered last week. A Boolean is a true-false statement. So whatever you name it, just think of the answer being true or false. All Booleans are variables, but not all variables are Booleans. A variable is indicated by an integer, any number positive or negative. So this could be a variable with a value of 2, 1 or 0, or 1 or 2, and be equivalent to a Boolean. But in most cases, a variable is going to have more than 2 answers. It could be 0 through 10, 0 through 3, 1 through 20. Depends on what you need that application to handle. So let's take a look at a couple of event maps. And when we start talking advanced event mappings, we're talking about putting event maps together that without one of these event maps, it does not work. So we're going to need all the event maps here for this to work correctly. So first one, an advanced play pause button from a KP7. Well, let's look at the list of event maps we need here. We're going to try to take one KP7 button press, and when we hit play the first time, okay, so we're basically going to hit the button, and our variable is going to equal 0. First thing we're going to do is set the variable to 1. Then we're going to turn on the light in the theater, select the source on the theater AVR, hit eject on the Blu-ray, wait a couple seconds, hit eject again to pull the Blu-ray in, couple second delay, hit play, and dim the lights. This works great. But what if we wanted it to pause when we hit it a second time? Well, that's the reason for the variables. We can track what state the system is in. So in this case, if we hit the button press and the variable equals 1, we're going to change the variable to equal 2, pause the Blu-ray, and raise the lights. Well, if we've got a pause command, we got to have a play command back in here. In this case, when the button is pressed and the variable equals 2, we're going to set the variable back to 1, so in a play state. We're going to hit play and dim the lights back down. We also need a fourth event map here. The last event map here is going to be when the source is unselected, the Blu-ray is unselected, set the variable to 0. Okay, so let's go see what this is going to look like. So if we go to our configurator, first thing we have to do is add a variable. So let's go ahead and add our variable, and we'll call it theater play state. Okay, and our default value of 0 is fine. So let's go ahead and start adding our event maps. The first event map, we're going to call it theater play variable 1. Okay. So in this, we're going to be looking for a button press, and we're going to use my Office KP7 for a button press, which we're going to scroll down, find Interface Device, Office KP7. We're going to use button number 3. All right, now we have to add our condition that will check our variable status. So we're going to add our variable, which is going to be theater play state, equal to value, and the value we're going to be looking for here is 0. So basically the zone is turned off or it's not using the Blu-ray as a source. Okay, so now we have to add our commands. We need to first change the variable, theater play state. We're going to change the variable. Now we can do this a couple different ways. We can add to it, or we can set the variable to a value. In this case, +1 would work fine, or we could just set the variable to 1, which will work fine as well. I prefer to do the plus or -1 when we have multiple commands that can trigger the event. In this, it's just one command for one state. We're going to change it to 1. Okay. So now we have to turn on lights. So we're going to use my overhead lights for my theater. And we're just going to go ahead and set a level. I don't want to bring them all the way up. So we're going to bring them up to about 90. Okay. Then we're going to go to our audio zone controller, which is our theater AVR. Theater, we're going to select source of Blu-ray. Okay. And then we're going to give a slight delay. Just use 1 second, that would be fine here. And now we're going to go do our IR command for our Blu-ray to eject, which in this case is called open close. Okay, so we're going to send that to the default device. All right, so once we hit eject, the tray comes out. We've got to give ourselves some time to put the disc in. In some cases, you may not be ready to drop it in, or you may be ready to drop it in. So I'm going to go up here to General System, Delay Execution. And I'm going to go ahead and give myself 20 seconds. Now we need to close the Blu-ray, so we're going to go back to IR Sender, Blu-ray, open close, send via default device. All right. So most of the time when some Blu-rays close, they automatically play, some do not. So in this case, we're just going to throw a play command in there, but I want to put a second delay after the close. So I'm just going to go in here and put a 1 second delay. And now I'm going to add my play command, which is an IR sender, Blu-ray, play, send IR via default device. All right, and the last thing we want to do is dim the lights. So that's going to be under lighting system. We'll go down to that overhead lights, and we're going to set the level to, let's say, 15%. Okay, so this is a nice little macro that would basically start watching a movie in a theater. But in this case, we want to use that same button to be the pause button that would pause and bring up the lights. Because you never know when the kids might spill the popcorn or need a body break or who knows what. This way, my kids can do it with just one button. They don't have to worry about it. Okay, so we need to add another event map. And I'm going to cheat and go ahead and copy my name. I prefer to copy the name. That way, whenever I do a group of event maps, they all have the similar name. Go ahead and paste that in here. We're going to do variable is set to 2. And variable set to 2 is going to be our pause command. So we're going to still have the same thing to start with. Our interface device, Office KP7, button press 3. And in this case, we want to see our variable equals 1. So for our theater play state, variable equals 1. What do we want to do? Well, we want to set the variable to 2. So we're going to go in here first. We're going to grab our variable, theater play set. And, we could change variable or set variable. In this case, I'm going to set the variable to 2. Now we have to do our IR command for our Blu-ray, which is going to be pause on default device. And then lighting system, overhead lights. We're going to set the level, say, 70. So we don't want to blind people in the theater because they've been watching a movie. All right. So that's event map number 2. Now let's get event map number 3. And I'm going to paste my name again. In this case, we're setting the variable back to 1, and I'm just going to put -1 back as my name. All right, and what's our event that's going to trigger this? The same thing. Interface device, KP7 for the office, button press 3. In this case, we're looking for our variable to equal 2. And what do we want to do here? We want to set the variable back to 1. So in this case, we could do change variable and subtract 1, or we can just set the variable to 1. When you set the variable to 1, IR sender, we're going to use Blu-ray play, default device, and we need to dim the lights back down. It's going to be my overhead lights, set level, and we used 15% earlier for our play, so we'll use 15 again. All right, so that's the first 3 event maps. The fourth one's a little bit different because we have to do it when somebody selects away from the Blu-ray, set the variable back to 0. So I'm going to go ahead and paste my name, and this is where we're going to be setting the variable back to 0. So this wouldn't be the KP7 button press. This is going to be the audio zone controller for that theater. And we're going to use source unselected of the Blu-ray player. This way, whenever somebody selects away from the Blu-ray player, doesn't matter what the variable's set to, we will change the variable to 0. We'll set the state to 0. Okay, so let's roll through these again just so you got them. First event map is a button press and the variable equals 0. Set the variable to 1, turn the lights on, select the source, wait a second, eject the Blu-ray, wait 20 seconds, eject again to suck it back in, wait a second, press play, and then set the lights to 15%. The next version of that is going to be the variable equals -2. That's where the button's pressed and the variable equals 1. We're going to set the variable to 2, pause, and turn up the lights. The variable 1 back is basically how we get away from the pause back to play. So we're going to look for that variable to equal 2, set the variable back to 1, press play, and dim the lights. The last event map there is just to be able to reset the variable. So when somebody selects away from the Blu-ray, we can go and set the variable back to 0. All right, so let's go look at another one. So the next one is a button press 10 times in 10 seconds, panic alarm. Okay. On the security system I have on this controller, there is no just panic command that we get from the alarm system. We actually set it up with a panic zone. And when you fault that zone, it sends a panic to the substation. And that's usually done with like a pendant or a hardwired push button. Well, in this case, we can virtually do that and set a panic. Well, we're going to use a KP7 button that when it's hit 10 times within 10 seconds, it sends that panic command. As long as you hit it 10 times, it doesn't matter if you hit it 11, 20, 30 times in 10 seconds, it will send the panic. So let's look at the first event map here. Button press and variable equals 0. Set variable to 1 and start a run once timer for 10 seconds. Okay, event map number 2 is button press and the variable is greater or equal to 1 and variable is less than or equal to 8 and the timer is running that we started earlier. Add 1 to the variable. This would be the case where we're not going to set the variable, we're going to add 1 to the variable. Next event map, button press and variable equals 9 and the timer is still running. Set security system panic as faulted. Now the one that's the catch on this is we've got to have an event map for if that timer expires, set variable equal to 0. Okay, so let's go back to configurator and see how this works. So if we go back into configurator, we've got to create a variable and a run once timer. So let's create those first. So the variable, I'm just going to call it panic. And we can have its starting value of 0. And we're going to have a run once timer. We'll call it panic as well. All right, so let's start our event maps. We're going to call this 10 by 10 panic. I forgot to type. And we'll go panic to 1. All right. So the trigger here is going to be a KP7 button. In this case, I can actually use a button that's already assigned for something else. I'm actually going to use my off button from my office keypad, because you're more than likely not going to press off more than once or twice within 10 seconds. So we're going to use button pressed off. So button pressed off and variable panic equals 0. We're going to now add 1 to our variable. In this case, use panic, set variable to 1, and we're going to start our timer. Panic, and we're going to start it at 10 seconds. All right, so I'm going to go up here and copy my name again. Add our second event map. Paste. In this case, it's going to be 2 to 8. So here we're going to use that same interface device button press, Office KP7 of off. And here we're going to have quite a few conditions. So the first one's going to be our variable state. So we got to have our panic is greater than or equal to 1, and our variable panic is less than or equal to 8, and our timer is running. Timer active equals true. Okay, So our command here is going to be fairly simple. It's going to just be variable, panic, change variable, and we're just going to go +1. So anytime the variable equals 1 to 8, we're going to just add 1 to it. Okay. Next event map. And this is going to be equal to 9. So our trigger here is going to be our interface device, Office KP7, off pressed, and our variable equals 9. And our timer is running. We're going to go to our security system, panic, simulate, vault on that zone. Okay, and some people might look at this and go, why are you using 9 instead of 10? Well, because we started as 0 as a state. Now we could make this 20, it doesn't matter. In this case, I'm using 10, it's a nice round number. Now we have one more event map here, because if the timer expires and you don't hit it 10 times, we need to set the variable back to 0. Otherwise, eventually somebody would hit it 10 times and panic the alarm. Not necessarily a good sign. And this is going to be the simple one. It's just going to be our timer expires. Set our variable, panic, set variable to 0. Okay, so let's run through these real quick. Panic to 1. Okay, so button pressed equals 0. Start our timer and change the variable to 1. If the variable is button pressed and variable is equal to or greater than 1, less than equal to 8, and the timer is active, just add 1 to the variable. Next one, if that variable equals 9 and the timer is active, simulate the fault. Basically meaning hit panic. And then the last one is if the timer expires, set variable to 0. So it doesn't matter if you hit this button 20 times within 10 seconds. All it's going to do something on is the first 10. Okay? All right, so let's see what else we got. Next one up was one we got quite a few requests for when we were talking about timers, which is date-triggered events like birthday or holiday. Well, first off, to do this, we have to create an event in the viewer using the alarm tab. And then we can just do an event map to execute off of that event. Okay, so let's go take a look at that. So let me bring up configurator and a viewer. So for those that aren't familiar with what we're talking about on the alarm tab, so when you go to your home screen, there's an alarm icon. If you press it, you can actually add different events or different alarms. Now, this would be the simple alarm clock that could go off every day at 6 a.m. or whatever. You can create it whatever you want. In this case, I've added a couple events and we'll add another one. One thing I like to point out is you can set this up to repeat every year. And if you notice, my wife's birthday, Nona, is March 26th, and it's already passed March 26th this year. So it's going to show the next time it's going to fire, which would be in 2021. These other two have not happened yet this year, so they're still going to show this year. Okay? So let's add an event for my daughter. Her name is Abby, and we'll just call it Abby's B-Day. And once you do that, it'll pop in here, and we have options under the alarm for type of alarm: once, daily, weekly, monthly, yearly. Yearly would be what we're looking for every year. Her birthday is February 17th. Okay, and I can trigger this at a specific time. I'm the guy that likes to run sunrise, which is going to be fun to wake her up in the morning and have her music playing. So what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to let it actually run at sunrise, and it's actually going to start playing Happy Birthday in her room. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to use my touch screen that is in my office because I'm not going to hear it. I'm just going to leave it there on the alarm clock. Okay. Snooze, disabled, crescendo, none. Timeout 5 minutes, proximity, dismiss. So all I'm looking for here is have something as a trigger. And I can change what it plays. Just a matter of what you want to do. I'll just do the alarm clock to make it quick and easy. So now I've got this timed, basically an event that happens every year. Now I can do event maps off of that. Okay. So let me go back to config. We're going to add a new event map, and we'll call this Abby. Okay. So what is going to be our triggered event here? Well, it's actually going to be this one that everybody thinks is security, but is actually alarms for our alarm clock. It'll list any of our available events, which Abby's birthday would be one of them. And you'll see that we've got quite a few options down here for dismissed, disabled, enabled, ended, snooze, cancel, snoozed. So if you had a daily alarm clock that went off that, 6 a.m. to wake you up, you could have it whenever you hit snooze, it starts playing music in the room. When it's canceled, it turns on the lights and starts your day. In this case, we're just going to use executed because I want to know when that trigger happens. And then I'm going to go down here at the bottom, and I'm just going to go in here to the audio zone controller. And I'm just going to use my office. It's the easiest one to grab. I'm going to select the source and use my Fusion Player. Now, I've already gone into my Fusion Player and created some favorite playlists. So if I go down to Media System and select my Fusion Player, I can execute a favorite, which in here I've already saved one that would be quite annoying any other day of the year, but it is Happy Birthday Radio. It is a bunch of just normal happy birthdays just being sung out. So I'm going to turn this on and have it start playing. And it'll play until she gets up and out of bed and starts to yell and scream for us to change it. With these event maps, you can see that these advanced event maps should be here to open your eyes and start getting you thinking of what you can do with event maps. So with this, we can do anything off of any time of year. We can do our timers. My panic button would be the way that you would add multiple commands off of number of button presses to a button. And then my advanced play is a way that you can actually combine buttons. So you don't have to use a play button and a pause button on a KP7. We've got so many things happening on one just KP7, you can't complain really about it only having 7 buttons, because we can do a lot with just 7 buttons. All right. And from there, I conclude this. If you have any questions, please contact your RTS. Thank you for attending.